Final Fantasy makes me feel old, and the series was already approaching double figures by the time I first played it. Back in the day of the PlayStation 1, the Final Fantasy series had no rival, and in my opinion has aged far better than any other game on the platform and even later games of the series. It manages this by playing to all of the PlayStation's strengths, sporting beautifully pre-rendered backgrounds, superb music, high quality CGI and cutscenes, memorable locations, and is to this day the most polished and balanced game that I have ever played. In this day of patches and bug fixes, it amazes me that Final Fantasy IX could span 4 discs, let you revisit areas later on, and featured hundreds of different items, spells and weapons, yet doesn't have a single bug. I mastered that game to the max, pushing it to the limit in every way. I tried levelling up to a massive extent early on. I tried breaking it by running out of the town I was in and into somewhere that I had visited 10 hours before. I did everything, and yet the game still worked, and better still, rewarded me for trying. It's a game that I play again every couple of years, and it doesn't ever disappoint, and every time I play I get closer and closer to playing the perfect game. I remember every side quest and the insane lengths you have to go to complete them. Forgetting to pick up a coffee bean in the corner of a place that you don't even have to visit at the right time will mean that you're unable to complete something later on. I miss those days. Final Fantasy IX does everything right. It is as polished as the Alexandria Tower and crams as much into its playtime as 10 other games. And yet it's almost forgotten when compared with the 7th game, or the 10th. It's as though it's trapped in the Nether Zone. I can understand why. The 7th and 10th games were the first to be released on the PlayStation 1 and 2 respectively, and offered a big technical jump compared with anything before. Compared with this, the 9th is merely a refined and polished version that plays things very safely. However, I don't regret playing the 9th first and almost feel sorry for people who haven't had such a great introduction to the series. It's reassuring to see that there's still a small cult of people who feel the same way as me online. Final Fantasy IX is filled with atmosphere that cannot be explained to a casual observer. It would be too easy for them to point out the low resolution graphics or cliched story and then to laugh at you for liking the game. But how can I explain? I'm clearly fighting a losing battle. In my family, I was the oldest of 3. I never had a big brother to look up to or to watch playing games that seemed too complicated for me. However, I did get to watch my friends play Final Fantasy. It was a mind-boggling experience. I couldn't comprehend how they could keep track of so many variables. I had true admiration for them and enjoyed watching them play. I'm guessing that's what having an older brother to look up to would be like. When handed the controller for the first time, I fell apart. I panicked when playing a battle, even though it actually waits for you to make a move. Final Fantasy IX will let you have 4 people in a fight, compared with 3, which is the standard in most of the series. That extra character adds so much more complexity and depth. I completely messed up my first playthrough of Final Fantasy IX, getting pounded by a massive flying ship. That sort of fate is surprisingly sensible, given the Japanese roots of the series. I was close to giving up, unable to advance further in this increasingly unfair and overpowering world. Fortunately, I was able to get my friend save, and wow, he had learned so many new skills, collected so many different items, and had a seemingly unlimited knowledge of every plant and creature. Using his OP character build, I felt like a god, defeating that airship and continuing on my way in the world. Final Fantasy was never a game that you could just pick up, play, complete, and then forget about. Every game is a world that will slowly open up to you as you play. You start by exploring a village, then a valley, then an entire city, followed by a continent, then another, until you unlock transport that lets you go anywhere at any time. The Chocobo side quest in Final Fantasy IX is still better than most entire games and fits perfectly with the rest of the game. Master this side quest and you'll be rewarded with a mode of transport that lets you explore more places earlier on, and yet still never manages to break the game's balance. As I said, the game has thought of everything, and it's only now, over 15 years after its release, that I can begin to appreciate the attention to detail. Like I said before, I've played through this game a number of times. I get better every time and appreciate the genius balance that lies just beneath the surface. It hasn't been without its problems. I stored all of my saves on a new 32MB memory card that then wiped everything. I was distraught. I could always borrow a save from my friend, but by this point I myself was on my way to mastering the game and took great pride in ensuring that everything was done just the way I liked it. If I didn't pick up an item at the first opportunity, it didn't matter that I could get it 5 hours later on. I had to reload to get it at the first given opportunity, even if I would never use it or benefit from its strengths. The beauty of this game lies in its pacing. If you choose not to level up by fighting enemies, you'll struggle. If you do a small amount of work, you'll limp on. Put a little bit more effort in, however, and you're rewarded with an easy next section of the game. You'll grow to master the enemies in that area, which will help when you encounter their bigger brothers later on. You'll find farming hotspots where enemies with easy weaknesses can provide large amounts of experience. You'll even find friendly creatures that reward you in other ways. I found myself investing in my character's futures even when the goal was just to get footage for this video. The fact that I still find this enjoyable when I don't even bother playing most modern games shows that there's still something endlessly replayable about the game. I'd argue that it hasn't even aged at all, and I'm very tempted to go back and play it from the beginning again right now. Having levelled areas gives a great sense of progression. You go from fearing enemies early on to coming back and pounding them without a problem later on. It's a sense of accomplishment that the Elder Scrolls games could really learn from. It's endlessly enjoyable, even hundreds of hours on and in a completely single player game. I love everything about this game, right down to the most basic of sound effects for the simplest of tasks. I occasionally freeze in public places, thinking that I heard it from a distant mobile phone and wondering if it's worth hunting that person down for a creepy chat. One part of me wishes that I could play it again for the first time, but another part is worried that I might not appreciate it and would lose far too many valuable memories in the process. I would opt for this game's text-based nature over the speech in later games any day, and I'm pleased to say that despite its fantasy style, it doesn't suffer from the ridiculous over-the-top gymnastics that plague later games and even the Final Fantasy movies. The one bit of the game that could have been better was the characters. Zidane the Monkey Boy pales in comparison to Cloud from Final Fantasy VII, and Kuja would get cut in half by Sephiroth in an instant. On the plus side you have Vivi, the weird midget mage who seems to get upset all the time. I remember having a long debate with friends in school about what would happen if you took his hat off, and got unreasonably angry when my friend's save of the game had him called Mivy. It was definitely worth 50 hours of gameplay to start it again to fix that. And who cares if I misread these names? It's not as if they're ever said in game. And is that Vivi's butt? Is that the only bit of him that they've rendered? To add to this you have Eiko, a child with see-through trousers. What is this madness? Stina, the rusty but faithful knight who's always angry and distrustful. Freya, a rat warrior who seemed too grown up for the game and often wants to be left alone. Dagger, a princess who goes all stroppy, loses her voice and wants to be left alone. That big red-headed guy who gets stressy and wants to be left alone. Actually pretty much every character is moody and unlikable at some point. Apart from Quina, who's a joke character who goes around eating everything and chasing frogs, but is probably the most badass character in the game. Cloud in Final Fantasy VII could survive explosions and long falls, but Quina at one point goes fishing, falls into a stream and washes up on another continent unscathed. Not to mention his weapon of choice, which confirms what I've always suspected about forks being more dangerous than knives. My life has changed an untold number of times since this game came out, and yet I still look back just as fondly at every bit of this game. Each town of every continent has secrets to tell, and if given the choice, I would rather live in this world complete with its petrified forests, evil floaty airships and moody characters than face the ordeals of my current life. I've never been a romantic person, but the thought of stepping into that world once again fills me with a warmth and gay sort of affection like no other game can manage. I'd go as far as to say that I've fallen in love with this game. And here I am, stuck in a perpetual nostalgic dream. I blast the battle music out of my car windows in the hope of getting a glance or smile, yet all I get are horrible looks. I'd kill for the chance to talk about the fight challenge and how I got 100% and Queen Brahne gave me 10,000 gil, or how the skipping challenge is both the best and worst minigame ever, or how I ate frogs until Quina gained a second instant over 9,000 damage attack. I'd love to see Burmecia before it was destroyed, or explore further into the city of Lindblum. I'd sit and watch the sunset from the cliffs near Dali, and race through the game to get Excalibur 2 in a heartbeat. I still have the walkthrough guide in my room, somewhere. I didn't get it to cheat, I got it so that I could swat up on my knowledge of the world even when I wasn't at my PlayStation 1. It's still got that lovely cardboardy smell. Back in the day, I looked up to friends who played the game. Now they've moved on and I filled their place. I like to think that I'm up to the task. Only a few years ago, my sister all but gave up on the game when she entered the no magic area with all magic characters and couldn't proceed. I was able to return the favour by giving her my high level character save. She didn't appreciate that I had learned every ability with every character, or was about 20 levels ahead of where I should have been at that point in the game. She probably downed that stash of elixirs that I had carefully hoarded. That save was special to me. On it I passed through the whole of Kuja's castle without a single fight. A true 1 in a billion chance of that happening. Perhaps it was a bug. But no, it couldn't have been. Final Fantasy IX doesn't have bugs.